The galaxy discovered the truth. Humans are the apex predator. The galaxy was vast, home to hundreds of advanced civilizations, each with its own strengths, cultures, and technologies. From the towering Quarosians, who commanded immense fleets, to the Selinthi, known for their speed and cunning, every species had carved out its place in the cosmos. The Galactic Council, an assembly of the most powerful and influential species, had been in charge of maintaining peace and order across the stars for centuries. For the longest time, humanity was seen as nothing more than a small, primitive species on a barely habitable planet. Earth was a world torn by war, poverty, and conflict. The human race, though intelligent, was seen as far behind other galactic powers, not yet ready to even venture beyond their own solar system. The idea of humanity being a threat to the greater galactic order was laughable to the established powers. No one could have imagined what would happen next. The first sign that humanity was different came during a diplomatic mission to a forgotten corner of the galaxy, a remote planet once used as a testing ground for dangerous bioengineered predators. For centuries, the Scyther, a monstrous creature created by a long-lost alien species, had been a source of terror. It had been released from containment multiple times, and each time it wreaked havoc, killing everything in its path. The Galactic Council had tried everything, high-tech weapons, elaborate traps, even genetically modified beings, to stop the Scyther, but nothing worked. The creature was too strong, too fast, and too deadly. The Council's best minds and military leaders had come to a painful conclusion. The Scyther was unbeatable. That was when a human, a diplomat named Jonathan Hayes, was sent on a peace mission to this desolate planet. Humanity's role in the galaxy had primarily been confined to peacekeeping and trade, often out of necessity rather than desire. Still, Jonathan had been chosen to represent humanity in talks with a coalition of alien species who sought to make the Scyther a tool of war. His job was to stop them from unleashing the beast on the galaxy, a task which seemed almost impossible to anyone who knew of the creature's power. The human diplomat arrived, traveling in the same starship he had used for countless diplomatic missions before. On the outside, nothing about him stood out. He was tall with unassuming features, and his clothes were simple, a black suit that looked like it belonged more to a bureaucrat than a warrior. But his mind, honed through years of negotiating peace treaties and navigating the complexities of galactic diplomacy, was sharp. Jonathan knew that if he was going to stop the use of the Scyther, he needed to outthink the alien powers, not outfight them. When Jonathan set foot on the planet, the silence was almost deafening. The planet had been abandoned by most, left to rot as an uninhabitable wasteland. The bioweapons that had once been tested here were all but forgotten, and the surrounding alien colonies had long since decided it wasn't worth the effort to reclaim the land. But the Scyther remained, a living relic of a past civilization's mistakes. The moment Jonathan saw the Scyther, he understood the challenge that lay ahead. Towering at over 10 feet tall, its body was an intimidating blend of armor and muscle. Its reptilian skin was thick and covered in sharp scales, and its eyes glowed with a menacing red light. The creature's presence radiated pure terror. Its roar alone was enough to send chills down the spine of any being who heard it. The alien leaders who had summoned Jonathan to this desolate world were watching from a secure distance. They were mostly an assortment of reptilian and insectoid species, their eyes glinting with a mix of curiosity and skepticism as they observed the human diplomat. Jonathan stood still, his heart racing, but his face remained calm. He wasn't here to fight the Scyther. He was here to prove that there was another way, a way that didn't involve the destruction of an entire species and possibly an entire planet. In the back of his mind, Jonathan knew that the mission was a long shot. But if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was surviving against the odds. The alien council members mocked him quietly, certain that the human would fail. A few whispered amongst themselves, making wagers on how long it would take for Jonathan to be ripped apart by the Scyther. It was laughable to them that the council had sent a mere human to solve a problem that had defied their best and brightest. The human diplomat, however, wasn't about to back down. "You think I came here to lose?" Jonathan asked, his voice steady but low. "You've forgotten something important about humanity. We've never been good at giving up." Without waiting for a response, he began moving. Slowly at first, he walked toward the Scyther, its eyes locking onto him, sensing his presence. Jonathan's every step was measured, deliberate, but it was clear that he wasn't rushing into the situation blindly. The Scyther roared, charging forward with terrifying speed. It was faster than anything Jonathan had ever seen, but Jonathan was ready. In a split second, he ducked to the side, his body instinctively evading the massive claws that swiped at him. The creature was powerful, but it lacked the finesse of a true predator. Jonathan's human instincts, though seemingly weaker in comparison, were based on a different kind of survival. While the Scyther was an engineered beast with pure strength and speed, humans had learned to survive through ingenuity, not sheer force. Jonathan didn't have a weapon. He didn't have any technology that could match the Scyther's raw power. Instead, he relied on his mind. His ability to read situations, think quickly, and adapt was what made humans so formidable. The galaxy might not have realized it yet, but humans were survivors, not just in the conventional sense, but in a way that made them the most dangerous creatures in the cosmos. As the Scyther lunged again, Jonathan dropped to the ground, narrowly avoiding the strike. He used its momentum against it, twisting the creature's massive body around until it was caught off balance. Jonathan took a deep breath, his fingers searching for something, anything that could help him. He found it, an old, rusted piece of metal half buried in the sand, discarded long ago by previous attempts to subdue the Scyther. With the speed and determination only a human could possess, Jonathan jammed the metal shard into the creature's eye. The Scyther shrieked in pain, reeling backward as its vision was compromised. It swung wildly, but Jonathan ducked and weaved, using the environment to his advantage. The human's ability to adapt was unparalleled, something no other species had quite grasped. After what seemed like an eternity, Jonathan found his opening. With a final surge of strength, he jammed the metal into the creature's neck, hitting a vulnerable spot he'd noticed earlier. The Scyther let out a final, gurgling roar before collapsing to the ground, dead. The silence that followed was deafening. The alien council members stared in shock, unable to comprehend what had just happened. A human, with nothing more than his wits and sheer willpower, had done what their best warriors could not. Jonathan stood, covered in the creature's blood, panting heavily. He looked at the alien leaders who had doubted him and offered them a simple, steady gaze. "Tell me again why you thought this couldn't be done." The truth was now undeniable. The humans were something else, something more. They had the ability to survive, to adapt, and to conquer in ways the galaxy had never seen before. No one would ever doubt humanity again. The death of the Scyther on that desolate planet did not mark the end of Jonathan Hayes' mission. Instead, it was only the beginning of something far more significant. When the creature fell, the galaxy was shaken. The council members, who had watched with skepticism and doubt, were now faced with the undeniable truth. Humanity was not the primitive species they had once thought. In the days that followed, the news spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The first contact between humans and the greater galactic community had been a moment of diplomacy, but it quickly became something much more profound. Jonathan Hayes, a diplomat with no special abilities, had brought down the most dangerous bioengineered predator ever created by using nothing but his mind, his instincts, and his determination. The story of the human who took down the Scyther reached every corner of the galaxy, and with it, the awareness that humanity was something more than anyone had realized. It wasn't just the Scyther that made the galaxy begin to reconsider humanity's place in the cosmos. It was the way Jonathan had approached the situation. While the great galactic powers relied on advanced technology, genetically engineered soldiers, and armies of war machines, humanity had shown that sheer willpower, creativity, and adaptability were just as powerful. The Scyther, an unbeatable weapon in the eyes of many, had been brought down by the simplest of tactics, by exploiting its weaknesses, by turning its strengths into its own downfall. This event had a profound effect on the perception of humanity, not only by the Council, but also by the galaxy's other species. The great powers had always considered humanity to be a species of no consequence, a species struggling to find its place in the universe. But now they realized that human beings were survivors, capable of more than anyone had imagined. As humanity's reputation began to grow, so did their influence. The Council, once dismissive, now saw humans in a different light. They had underestimated the human capacity for resilience, and now, with the news of Jonathan's victory over the Scyther, they had no choice but to take humanity seriously. The council held a meeting after the Scyther's death. It was an urgent gathering, one that included representatives from the most powerful species in the galaxy. The Quarosians, with their towering, armored bodies and immense fleets, the Selinthi, who could manipulate time itself in battle, the Equatari, whose weapons could tear through entire planets, and many others were all present. They came together not just because of Jonathan's act, but because of what it represented. "Humanity cannot be ignored anymore," said Talakora, the leader of the Quarosians. His voice was deep, resonating with authority as he looked across the room, his massive form hunched slightly in his chair. "We must decide what to do about this species. They are not like the others we have encountered. Their strength is not in their weapons, but in their minds." There was a murmur among the council. Talakora's words were unsettling, but they were true. Humans had proven that intelligence, creativity, and adaptability were as deadly as any weapon, and these were traits that the galaxy had never fully accounted for. "How did he do it?" asked a voice from the back of the room. It belonged to a representative of the Selinthi, a species known for its speed and manipulation of time. "No species has ever been able to deal with the Scyther. We tried, we failed. How did a human do it?" Talakora's eyes narrowed. He looked at the human diplomat, Jonathan Hayes, who stood silently in the corner of the room, his eyes focused on the floor. Jonathan had been invited to this meeting to explain himself, but he had said little. His demeanor was calm, almost detached, and yet it was clear that his mind was working overtime. "It's not just the Scyther," Jonathan said quietly, breaking the silence. The room fell still and all eyes turned toward him. "You all rely on technology, on weapons, on strength. But what you don't understand about humans is that we survive by adapting. We've fought wars, we've survived disasters, we've lived through hardships you can't even imagine. We don't fight by your rules, we fight by our own." The room was silent for a long moment, as if the galaxy's greatest minds were struggling to process what the human diplomat had just said. It wasn't an explanation of how he defeated the Scyther. It was something far deeper, a fundamental understanding of the human spirit. The galaxy's species had always relied on their superior technology and their ancient powers, but Jonathan was suggesting something else, something far more dangerous. Humanity's power didn't come from the things they had, but from who they were. In the days that followed, humanity began to play a more central role in the galaxy. Jonathan's victory had changed everything. More and more humans were called upon to solve crises, to negotiate peace, and to lead missions that seemed impossible to other species. And each time they succeeded. Their reputation as survivors, resourceful, cunning, and unyielding, grew with each victory. But it wasn't just about what they did, it was about how they did it. While the Quarosians and the Selinthi excelled in combat, they did so by using overwhelming force or bending the laws of nature to their will. Humans, on the other hand, relied on strategy, perseverance, and a deep understanding of their enemies. It was this unique approach that set them apart from the other species in the galaxy. And as humanity's power began to grow, so did the uncertainty among the galaxy's other races. There were whispers in the dark corners of space, hidden behind closed doors, that humanity's rise posed a threat to the established order. Some feared that humanity's growing influence would destabilize the balance of power in the galaxy. Others saw the humans as a potential weapon to be wielded, a tool to shift the balance in favor of whichever race controlled them. But not everyone viewed humanity as a threat. There were those, like the Equatari, who saw humans as an ally. The Equatari, a peaceful species who believed in the power of knowledge and cooperation, saw the humans as a people they could trust. They were the first to offer an alliance, seeing in humanity the potential for a new kind of peace in the galaxy, one built not on power and dominance, but on mutual understanding and respect. This alliance was not without its challenges, however. Many of the other galactic powers were suspicious of the Equatari's intentions. The Quarosians, in particular, saw the humans as an obstacle to their dominance. They had been the apex predators of the galaxy for centuries, their vast fleets and superior strength making them a force to be reckoned with. But now, they were being challenged by a species they had once considered beneath them. And so, the quiet tension between the galaxy's powers began to rise. Humanity had awakened something that had long been dormant, the fear of a species that could not be controlled, a species that could survive anything the galaxy threw at them. As Jonathan Hayes sat in the council chamber, watching the debates unfold, he realized that his role was changing. He was no longer just a diplomat. He was a symbol of something much greater, of humanity's ability to defy the odds, to survive against impossible odds, and to become something the galaxy could no longer ignore. The truth was undeniable now. Humanity was the apex predator, not just of Earth, but of the entire galaxy. They had risen from the ashes of their war-torn world and proven that they were capable of anything. And though some still viewed them as a threat, others saw them as the key to a new order, one in which the galaxy could work together to overcome the greatest challenges of the universe. As Jonathan left the council chamber that day, he knew that humanity's journey had only just begun. The galaxy was vast, and the challenges ahead would be great. But one thing was certain: humanity was ready for whatever came next. It was inevitable. Humanity's unexpected rise from the shadows of the galaxy had caused ripples throughout the known universe. While some species were drawn to them, others began to question if humanity's influence should be allowed to grow unchecked. To test their theory, a species known as the Andali, the galaxy's most ruthless and technologically advanced race, decided it was time to challenge humanity's so-called apex predator status. The Andali were a feared race, known for their superior intellect and their penchant for testing the limits of other civilizations. With their vast network of spies, they had kept a close eye on humanity since Jonathan Hayes' victory over the Scyther. They had watched with growing unease as the human race continued to rise, solving problems no one else could and earning respect in every corner of the galaxy. To the Andali, it was clear: humanity was a threat to their dominance. If the human race could defeat a creature like the Scyther, what else could they do? What other challenges would they present? The Andali were not ones to sit idly by while another species, especially one so seemingly weak, threatened their hold on power. In a grand, ceremonial hall on one of the Andali's most secure planets, the challenge was set. The Andali, ever the masters of manipulation, created the ultimate test, the arena of the invincible. It was a place where the galaxy's fiercest warriors, those who had proven themselves in battle, who had defeated armies, conquered planets, and shattered stars, could come together in a fight for survival. The rules were simple: no technology, no outside help. Only the combatants, their skills, and their strength would determine the victor. The last one standing would earn the title of the galaxy's true champion. The Andali's plan was genius. They had invited humanity, expecting that no human could survive against their finest warriors. They knew that no species could match their advanced technology or physical prowess. And yet they invited Jonathan Hayes, the human diplomat who had bested the Scyther, to face off against the galaxy's mightiest. They believed that once Jonathan was defeated, humanity's place in the galaxy would be firmly established, beneath the Andali where it belonged. When Jonathan received the invitation, he didn't hesitate. He had no illusions about what this meant. He knew that the Andali were not interested in peace or diplomacy. They wanted to test humanity to see if they could back up their newfound reputation. But Jonathan wasn't afraid. The death of the Scyther had taught him something vital. Humans didn't back down from challenges, no matter how impossible they seemed. And so, Jonathan accepted the challenge. The stakes were high, but the message was clear: humanity would not be cowed. They had earned their place in the galaxy, and they would fight to keep it. As the day of the competition drew closer, Jonathan prepared. He wasn't a soldier by training, but he was a survivor. He had faced enemies far stronger and more dangerous than any that would meet him in the arena. He had faced the unthinkable and come out alive. He knew that this would not be about brute force. This would be a battle of wits, tactics, and endurance. And Jonathan Hayes was more than capable. The arena itself was an enormous, circular structure made of dark, gleaming metal. The ground beneath was a patchwork of uneven terrain, with jagged rocks, deep craters, and shifting platforms. The Andali had designed it to be a place of chaos, where only the fittest could survive. Jonathan stood at the entrance, looking out over the battlefield, his mind already working. He wasn't focused on the other combatants. He was focused on the environment. What could he use to his advantage? How could he turn the arena into his weapon? The other competitors had already entered. Some were massive, towering figures, their muscles rippling with unnatural strength. Others were sleek and fast, their agility making them appear like ghosts. Some were alien creatures with powers that defied the laws of physics. All of them were formidable in their own right, but Jonathan was undeterred. He had faced down impossible odds before. The key to survival was never to underestimate his opponents, but to understand them. He needed to know their strengths and their weaknesses, and he needed to act quickly before anyone realized that he wasn't just a diplomat. He was a predator. The countdown began, and the arena fell silent. Jonathan's heartbeat slowed as he focused on the task at hand. He wasn't thinking about the massive alien warriors who loomed around him, or the strange energy beings that hovered just beyond the edge of his vision. He wasn't even thinking about how many of them there were. All he could focus on was what he needed to do to survive. The moment the countdown ended, chaos erupted. The massive warriors charged at each other, their thundering steps shaking the ground beneath them. Jonathan moved quickly, his eyes scanning the battlefield for the first opportunity to strike. A hulking alien, its skin armored in a thick shell, barreled toward him, swinging its massive fist with the force of a meteor. Jonathan ducked and rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the blow. He used the momentum to propel himself into the air, landing on a nearby platform. From there, he surveyed the battlefield. The warriors were distracted by each other, their primal instincts driving them to attack without thinking. Jonathan knew that this was his advantage. The others might be powerful, but they lacked the one thing that humanity excelled at: strategy. Humans thought ahead. They planned, they adapted. The battle continued around him, the sound of roaring aliens and the clash of fists and weapons filling the air. Jonathan watched as one of the larger aliens, an insected creature with wings that buzzed like a swarm of locusts, was knocked back by a massive blow from a brute-like creature. The insectoid scrambled to its feet, looking around for an opening. It was quick, but it wasn't paying attention to the environment. Jonathan moved swiftly, using the shifting platforms beneath him to his advantage. He closed the distance between himself and the insectoid, timing his attack perfectly. As the creature lunged toward him, Jonathan sidestepped and grabbed it by the wings. With a twist, he threw it onto the jagged rocks below, where it landed with a sickening crunch. The crowd watching from above fell silent. They had expected a human to be crushed in minutes, but Jonathan was showing them something different. He wasn't just surviving, he was fighting back. His opponents were strong, but he was stronger in his mind. He wasn't fighting with brute force. He was fighting with precision. As the battle raged on, Jonathan continued to use the terrain to his advantage. He outmaneuvered the alien warriors, exploiting their weaknesses and staying one step ahead of them. Each time an opponent attacked, Jonathan was already prepared, anticipating their moves with uncanny accuracy. He dodged blows, used his surroundings to block attacks, and struck with deadly efficiency when the opportunity arose. Hours passed, and one by one the competitors fell. The massive, hulking warriors were no match for Jonathan's speed and cunning. The alien powers who had once thought of themselves as invincible were learning a painful lesson. Humanity was not to be underestimated. Finally, only two opponents remained in the arena: Jonathan and the Andali champion. The Andali, known for their intelligence and strategic minds, was a formidable foe. It had been watching Jonathan carefully throughout the battle, analyzing his moves, trying to determine the best way to defeat him. It was fast, calculating, and incredibly dangerous. The final fight was an intense, brutal exchange. The Andali champion attacked with lightning speed, its movements sharp and precise. Jonathan dodged and countered, using every ounce of his training and experience to keep up. For a moment, it seemed as though the Andali might have the upper hand. But Jonathan wasn't finished yet. He waited for the perfect moment, then lunged forward, grabbing the Andali's arm and twisting it behind its back. With a quick motion, he flipped the champion onto the ground, pinning it to the arena floor. The Andali struggled, but Jonathan held firm, his strength and determination overcoming its resistance. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Jonathan Hayes, a human diplomat, stood victorious in the center of the arena. The Andali champion, a being of unimaginable power, lay defeated beneath him. And in that moment, the galaxy understood the truth. Humanity was not just a survivor. They were the apex predator, the victory in the Andali arena reverberated throughout the galaxy. The spectacle of Jonathan Hayes, a simple human diplomat, defeating the galaxy's finest combatants, creatures bred for war and equipped with the most advanced technologies, left every corner of the galaxy in shock. The words apex predator became a common refrain in the days that followed. No one had ever expected humanity to possess such a level of cunning and strength. For years, the galaxy's most powerful species had believed that they were the apex, until one human shattered that belief with nothing more than his mind, his instincts, and a ruthless will to survive. Humanity had become a symbol of defiance. They weren't the most technologically advanced species. They didn't have the sprawling starships or the world-shattering weapons that the Quarosians possessed. They didn't bend the fabric of reality like the Scifi, or harness the immense energy of stars like the Equatari. But they had something none of the other species had, something far more dangerous: the ability to adapt, to outthink their enemies, and to survive against all odds. Jonathan's victory in the arena had not been just about winning a fight. It was a turning point. It was a statement. It was humanity's declaration that they were no longer to be considered a mere footnote in the galaxy's vast history. They were here to stay, and they weren't going to back down. In the days that followed, representatives from various species approached Jonathan with offers of alliances. The Equatari, ever the diplomats, were the first to extend an olive branch, offering humanity a seat at the table of galactic governance. Their offer was sincere. They believed that humanity could be a force for peace, a stabilizing influence in a galaxy that had long been teetering on the edge of conflict. But not everyone viewed humanity's rise with such optimism. The Quarosians, who had ruled over their vast empire with an iron fist for centuries, saw humanity as a threat to their power. They had always been the apex predators, and the idea that a mere human could defeat one of their greatest foes in the arena was a slap in the face. For them, humanity's victory wasn't something to celebrate, it was something to be feared. The Quarosian fleet, the largest and most powerful in the galaxy, began to move into position along the borders of human space. While they did not yet declare war, the message was clear. The Quarosians saw humanity as a challenge that needed to be dealt with before they could gain any more influence. And it wasn't just the Quarosians. The Scifi, whose ability to manipulate time and space had made them one of the galaxy's most feared species, were also watching humanity with growing suspicion. They had seen what Jonathan Hayes had done in the arena, and they knew that if humans could defeat the Scyther and the Andali champion, they could be capable of anything. Their power, once based on an unrivaled ability to bend time itself, was no longer enough to guarantee their place at the top. The Scifi had always believed that time and speed were the greatest advantages in combat, but now they realized that human ingenuity could trump even those advantages. For weeks, the galaxy held its breath. There were whispers of war in the air. Diplomats, soldiers, and generals from all corners of the galaxy began to prepare for something inevitable. The Council, once united in its peaceful mission of maintaining balance, had fractured. Tensions were rising. The age-old power structures were being challenged by the very species that had once been relegated to the fringes of galactic civilization. Jonathan Hayes, now a symbol of humanity's newfound strength, found himself in the middle of it all. He was no longer just a diplomat. He was the face of a revolution, the embodiment of humanity's rise to power. But despite the political intrigue and military preparations that swirled around him, Jonathan remained focused on one thing: survival. He knew that humanity could not afford to be passive. They had earned their place in the galaxy, but the galaxy was not going to give it to them easily. The coming storm, the inevitable clash of powers, was not something he could prevent, but it was something he could navigate. His mind, honed through years of diplomatic negotiations, would be humanity's greatest weapon. As Jonathan walked through the corridors of the human flagship, the Resolve, he felt the weight of the galaxy's expectations pressing down on him. He had once been a simple diplomat, navigating the complexities of human politics and intergalactic negotiations. Now, he was at the heart of something far bigger. The future of humanity, of every human alive, rested on his shoulders. He entered the command center, where a group of the best military minds in the galaxy were gathered around a holographic map of the galaxy. The human fleet, though not as advanced as some of the galaxy's more powerful forces, had grown considerably over the past few months. The Resolve was now a symbol of human strength, an unassuming ship on the outside, but inside it was a formidable vessel. The fleet had been constructed to survive in hostile environments, built with the ingenuity that had made humanity so dangerous in the first place. "Jonathan," said Captain Alara Ross, a seasoned leader who had fought in countless battles, "the Quarosians are moving into position. They've deployed a blockade around our colonies in the Outer Rim. They won't strike unless provoked, but it's clear they want us to make the first move." Jonathan studied the map for a moment, his mind working quickly. He had seen the Quarosian fleet's movements before. It was a typical show of strength, designed to intimidate. But Jonathan knew that the Quarosians were not the only threat. The Selinthi were watching from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. The galaxy's greatest powers had all seen humanity's rise, and they all had their own reasons for wanting to contain it. "We're not going to start a war," Jonathan said, his voice steady, "but we need to show them that we're not afraid. We're going to send a message, and we're going to do it without firing a single shot." Alara raised an eyebrow. "How do you propose we do that?" Jonathan smiled. "We'll use the one advantage the galaxy doesn't understand about humanity, our ability to adapt." The plan was simple. Humanity wasn't going to fight a war against the Quarosians or the Selinthi. Instead, they would show them that humanity could survive without fighting. The Resolve would maneuver through the Quarosian blockade, using speed and stealth to slip past their defenses. It would be a bold move, one that would force the Quarosians to question their assumptions about humanity's strength. The Resolve was small, fast, and agile, designed for maneuverability, not brute force. With the right strategy, it could outsmart the larger, more powerful Quarosian ships. Jonathan knew that it wasn't about firepower, it was about making a statement. If humanity could slip past the Quarosians without a single shot being fired, it would send a powerful message to the entire galaxy. Humanity was not to be underestimated. The human fleet moved into position, and Jonathan watched as the Resolve engaged its stealth systems, slipping into the Quarosian blockade with the precision and grace of a shadow. The Quarosians were caught off guard, their ships scrambling to respond to the unexpected maneuver. But it was too late. The Resolve was already through, sending a clear message to the galaxy's most powerful species. Humanity had earned its place at the top, and it would not be moved. As Jonathan watched the Quarosian ships retreat, he knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy had just been shown what humanity was capable of, but the real test was still ahead. The Selinthi, the Quarosians, and the other galactic powers were watching. They would not let humanity's rise go unchallenged. But for the first time in history, humanity wasn't afraid. They had survived against impossible odds. And now they would take their place among the stars. The silence that followed Jonathan Hayes' successful maneuver through the Quarosian blockade was unlike anything the galaxy had experienced. For years, humanity had been dismissed as insignificant, a race struggling to survive on a planet ravaged by its own wars. But the actions of Jonathan and the human fleet had shattered that perception. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer a footnote in the galaxy's history. They had become a force to be reckoned with. The Quarosians, though proud and fierce, had been forced to retreat. But their pride had been wounded, and they did not take kindly to humiliation. While Jonathan and his crew celebrated their success aboard the Resolve, the galaxy's other powers were busy making their own calculations. The Selinthi, ever the shadowy manipulators, began to stir. The Equatari, who had once seen humanity as a potential ally, started to reconsider their position. And the Andali, whose pride had been shattered by humanity's victory in the arena, now saw an opportunity to strike. In the weeks that followed, humanity found itself caught in a web of galactic politics. The Quarosians, though embarrassed, had not given up. They were amassing their forces, preparing for the next move. The Selinthi, with their ability to manipulate time and space, began testing humanity's defenses, probing for weaknesses. The Andali, ever the schemers, began to work behind the scenes, whispering to factions both powerful and small, stoking the fires of distrust. Jonathan Hayes knew that humanity's victory in the blockade was only the beginning. The galaxy was shifting, and every species, from the smallest to the most powerful, had to adapt. Humanity had made its mark, but the cost of that mark was only beginning to be realized. The first real challenge came from the Scifi. With their powers to manipulate time, they had always held an edge over other species. They could slow down their enemies, trap them in moments where every second stretched on forever, or speed themselves up to move faster than anyone could comprehend. But humanity had already proven that they could adapt to the unthinkable. Now the Scifi would put that to the test. Jonathan had known that the Scifi wouldn't let humanity's rise go unchallenged. They had been watching from the moment the human diplomat stepped into the Andali arena and showed the galaxy what a human could do. Now they were testing humanity's limits. Their ships appeared in the outer rim, and the first skirmish between the Scifi and humanity's forces was swift. A human cruiser moving at full speed was caught in a temporal trap, a place where time moved differently. It felt as though the crew was stuck in an eternity, unable to move, unable to fight back. But Jonathan was prepared. The human fleet, though smaller, had been trained with one goal in mind: to survive. The key to victory was always in the mind, not the weapons. The crew had learned to move with precision, to think in ways that no other species had expected. They understood that when the Scifi slowed time, they had to adjust. The human fleet was quick on their feet, adapting to the new way the Scifi fought. For hours, Jonathan's ships navigated the distortions, their crews working together in a synchronized rhythm that took advantage of the slightest gaps in the Scifi's manipulation of time. It was a battle of wits, not weapons. The human ships, though slower in speed, were more agile in their decision-making. They knew that if they could weather the storm, the Scifi would falter. And so they did. The first major defeat of the Scifi came not through strength, but through patience. Jonathan's fleet managed to break the temporal trap by using the Scifi's own manipulation of time against them. They turned the time distortion into a weapon, forcing the Scifi into a situation where they could no longer keep up with the human fleet's unpredictable maneuvers. The battle ended with the human fleet victorious, but it came at a high cost. Many ships were damaged, many lives were lost. Back at the human command center, Jonathan stood, staring out into the void of space. The Scifi had learned that humans could not be controlled, could not be manipulated. They had tried to bend time itself to their will, and humanity had adapted. The victory was a clear message. Humanity would not be broken, no matter the odds. But the galaxy was not content with simply letting humanity have its moment. The Quarosians were moving their fleet again, this time toward the inner systems. They saw the human victory as a challenge to their authority, and they would not tolerate it. The Quarosians had long ruled the galaxy with an iron fist, and they were not about to let a race like humanity threaten that. They would have their revenge. Jonathan knew that war was coming. It wasn't something he wanted, but it was inevitable. The galaxy's most powerful species were too proud to let a race of humans who had once been their subordinates rise to such a position of power. They would fight to keep their dominance, and humanity would have no choice but to defend itself. The first clash between the human fleet and the Quarosians came unexpectedly. The Quarosians launched a full-scale invasion of the human colonies in the Outer Rim. Their fleets were massive, their technology unparalleled. They believed that the human fleet, though clever, would be no match for their sheer firepower. But they underestimated one thing: humanity's ability to survive, no matter the odds. The battle was brutal. The human fleet was outmatched in terms of firepower and size, but Jonathan's tactics proved to be more than a match for the Quarosians. The human ships didn't fight with brute strength. They fought with intelligence, using their speed and unpredictability to avoid direct conflict whenever possible. They knew that they couldn't take on the Quarosian ships head-to-head, so they focused on weakening the larger fleet by taking out key command ships and disrupting supply lines. As the days dragged on, the Quarosians began to realize that they were losing. Humanity's tactics, though unorthodox, were working. The Quarosian ships, though technologically superior, were falling one by one to human strategy. Jonathan's fleet didn't fight fair. They didn't fight according to the rules. They fought to win, and they did it with everything they had. The battle turned into a war of attrition, and the Quarosians were not prepared for it. They had underestimated humanity's resilience, their ability to adapt. The human fleet, though smaller, was smarter. They knew how to turn the tables, how to force the enemy into making mistakes, and they kept pushing forward. Finally, the Quarosians were forced to retreat. Their fleet was in shambles, and their leadership was in disarray. Humanity had won the first major confrontation, and the message was clear to the galaxy. Humanity was not a race to be underestimated. They were the apex predator now, and no one, not even the galaxy's most powerful species, could challenge that. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. The victory was celebrated across the planet, not just as a military success, but as a symbol of humanity's newfound place in the stars. The world, once divided by its own struggles, now stood united in a way that it never had before. The human race had faced impossible odds and had come out on top. They had shown the galaxy that they were no longer the weak, struggling species they had once been. They were survivors, and they were here to stay. In the days and weeks that followed, the galaxy watched in awe. The Quarosians, the Selinthi, the Andali, they all saw the truth. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, not through technology or brute force, but through its sheer will to survive. It wasn't just about winning battles. It was about the determination to keep going, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. The galaxy had learned an important lesson: never underestimate humanity. And with that, humanity took its place as the new apex predator of the galaxy. The reign of the humans had begun.